I'm 68 years old. My knees know it if I don't. I want to talk about what happens after me.
He set his fork down square in the center of his plate, which was how he ended a subject, or started one he'd been saving. Mars felt the table's attention swing toward her the way heat swings when someone opens the walk-in, all at once from everywhere. Her mother didn't look up from her plate. Her uncle did, and smiled like this was the good part.
You've worked every station in this place since you were 14. You close faster than your uncle. You've got the numbers in your head before Tuesday's delivery even shows up. I want to sign this restaurant to you, Marisol. Not someday. Soon.
He said it plainly, no flourish, the way he'd say the fryer oil needed changing, a fact he'd already decided on, delivered to the person it concerned. He wasn't performing for the table. He believed it was already settled. He was only telling her the date.
No.
The word came out faster than she'd built it, which was its own kind of answer.
No.
Testing the shape of it back at her.
I can't take the restaurant, Abuelo. It's not... This place is fine. Better than fine. You built something that works. That's not what this is.
She kept her hands flat on the table so they'd have something to do besides move.
Then what is it?
She didn't have the sentence yet. She had the six top out front still working on their coffee, and the walk-in door that stuck if you didn't lift it, and 40 years of her family's life sitting in the room around her, and none of that added up to the words.
I can't spend the rest of my life running the thing somebody handed me. I need it to be mine because I picked it, not because I was born into the seat.
Her uncle's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Her mother's eyes came up off her plate for the first time since dinner started and stayed on Mars, unreadable.
This is your family?
Not sharp, quieter than sharp, which was worse.
I know what it is. It's not the family I'm saying no to.
Her voice cracked once on is, and she hated that it did. Nobody at the table answered that. The six top out front finally stood up to leave, and through the pass-through, Mars could see her cousin bussing their table, stacking the empty mugs 3 high the wrong way, about to lose one off the edge. She was up and across the room before she'd decided to move, catching the top mug an inch before it hit tile, resetting the stack low and centered the way it should have been built in the first place. Her cousin blinked at her. She didn't explain it. She just went back to the family table and sat back down in the silence she'd left there, hands smelling like coffee rings now instead of nothing. Her grandfather watched her do it. He didn't say anything about the mugs. He picked his fork back up, turned it once between his fingers, and set it down again without eating.
Okay.
Just that. He didn't ask her to reconsider, and he didn't tell her she was wrong. That was almost worse than if he had. 3 days later, Mars had gone through the classifieds twice and both times landed nowhere near a kitchen on purpose. She wasn't going to wait tables at her cousin's friend's place or take a line cook shift 2 towns over. Anything with a menu or a walk-in felt like she'd be back where she started, just with someone else's name on the door. She needed a paycheck, she needed one fast, and she needed the job to not taste like food service at all. Winslow Promotional Group had a handwritten sign taped inside the front window. Help wanted. Shipping receiving. The building was one long room dressed up as 3. A front office up near the street, some kind of print and decoration set up in the middle with a machine she didn't recognize. And past that, a corner stacked with cardboard and a folding table with a label printer on it. Shelving that looked like it had grown sideways instead of been planned. From the front door she could hear a phone ringing all the way in the back, like the whole building was one room with furniture in it. A man behind the front desk, heavy-set, easy voice, the kind of guy who probably introduced himself by his first name to everyone including customers, looked up from a stack of invoices.
Help you?
I'm here about the shipping job.
Yeah, you done this kind of work before?
I've run a kitchen line for 6 years. I can read a ticket, I can move fast, and I don't leave a mess for the next shift.
He looked her over for a second, not unkindly, just sizing up whether she'd last a week.
Hal Winslow. It's not glamorous back there. Boxes, labels, UPS pickup at 4, pays by the hour.
That's fine.
You can start Thursday?
I can start today.
That got a short laugh out of him, more surprised than amused.
Thursday's fine. Ask for Deb. She'll get you a timesheet.
He was already looking back down at his invoices, already 3 thoughts past this conversation. A man who ran a company that worked well enough that hiring the shipping corner's newest body didn't need to hold his attention past the handshake. Mars walked past the print machines on her way out, past a chemical smell she didn't recognize yet and would in a month, out to the corner with the folding table and the leaning shelves that would be hers on Thursday. Nobody back there looked up. Nothing about the room asked anything of her beyond the next box. That was exactly what she'd come for. No box labeled 4471. Mars had the corner memorized the way she used to have the line memorized, where the tape gun lived when nobody had stolen it, which shelf sagged if you loaded it wrong, which drawer on the folding table stuck. 2 weeks in, and she could find a box in under a minute now without reading every label. She'd stopped thinking of it as someone else's setup and started thinking of it as hers, the way any station became yours once your hands learned it. The order sheet for the afternoon pull was a printout of the access file, still warm from the little laser printer up front, a grid of order numbers and quantities, and a status column that mostly said packed or pending in the same 3 fonts, because whoever built the spreadsheet years ago had never quite finished turning it into a real database. Order 4471, Ferraro Dental, 40 navy polos with an embroidered tooth and smile logo on the left chest. A reorder for a health fair the following week. Status, packed, ready for UPS at 4. She'd gone to the shelf where packed orders sat boxed and taped, waiting on the pickup, expecting to find it there. She checked the shelf again, slower this time, reading every label left to right the way she used to run a rail of tickets to make sure nothing had been fired twice. Nothing. She checked the shelf below it in case someone had shoved it down when the top row filled up. Still nothing. Then she found the polos themselves, not boxed, not taped, just sitting loose in a half-empty shipping tote shoved under the folding table, 40 navy shirts still in their plastic sleeves from the decorator, a post-it stuck to the top one that said 4471, done, needs box in handwriting she didn't recognize. No date on the post-it. Could have been from that morning, could have been from 3 days ago. She flipped back to the paper order book, the thick 3-ring binder everybody still wrote in half the time instead of touching the access file because typing took longer than a pen, and found 4471 there too, in someone's handwriting, with a check mark next to decorated and counted, but nothing next to boxed or shipped. Neither one matched the shirts sitting in a tote under a table. Her stomach did the thing it used to do at the pass, that specific drop when she'd catch a ticket about to go out with the wrong side or a missing sauce. Not panic, just a cold little certainty that something true and something official had come apart from each other and somebody was about to find out the hard way. Back home, there'd always been an expo standing between the line and the dining room, someone whose whole job was catching exactly this before it went out the door. She stood there a second with her hand flat on the cold plastic of the tote, waiting for that person to appear and take it off her hands. Nobody did. There was no expo line here. There was just her, a printout, a binder, and a box of shirts that 3 different pieces of paper disagreed about. Nobody did. There was no expo line here. There was just her, a printout, a binder, and a box of shirts that 3 different pieces of paper disagreed about. She didn't say anything to anyone. It wasn't her order, not really. Nobody had put her name on it, and she'd been here 2 weeks, not long enough to walk up front and tell Hal Winslow his computer was lying. She boxed the polos herself, taped it, wrote 4471 on the side in marker, walked it to the packed shelf where it should have been sitting an hour ago, and updated the status column on the printout by hand since she didn't have a login for the access file yet. Small thing. Fixed now, nobody would ever know it had been wrong. But she stood there a second longer than the job required, looking at the gap on the shelf where the box hadn't been. She went back to the folding table, pulled the little spiral notepad she used for UPS tracking numbers out of the drawer, flipped past the pages of scrawled numbers to a blank one near the back, and wrote the date. Then 4471, system said packed, wasn't. Found loose under table. Book didn't match either. She underlined didn't match once, capped the pen, and put the notepad back in the drawer, in the spot where the tape gun usually lived when nobody had stolen it. Nobody had asked her to keep a list. She didn't have a theory yet for why the numbers wouldn't hold still. She just knew, the way she'd always known which ticket on the rail was about to go out wrong, that this was the kind of thing worth writing down before you understood it, because by the time you understood it, it was usually too late to have written it down. 12 days on a 3-day promise. Mars had been carrying that number since yesterday, and it hadn't gotten any less strange for the carrying. The middle of the building belonged to Ruth Delgado, the way the shipping corner had started in 2 weeks to belong to Mars. Not on any org chart, just in the way nobody else touched the shelves there without asking first. Print, decoration, staging sat between the front office and the dock, close enough that Mars had walked past its edges a dozen times without ever crossing all the way in. Rolling racks of blanks waiting on vendor pickup, a long table for the touch-up embroidery work Winslow still did in-house, cardboard everywhere in the particular disorder that meant somebody knew exactly where everything was. Mars had a manifest in her hand and a real reason to be there, a shipment needing a head count before it went out. But she'd also had that question sitting in her since yesterday, and this was as good an excuse as she was going to get to ask it.
You need something back here.
Not a question. Mars had noticed that about her. Everything came out flat, statement-shaped, even when it wasn't.
The Cortland Health reorder. Scrub tops, the department color ones. It's been sitting 12 days. Ticket says 3-day turnaround.
Mars had pulled the order sheet before she came over, had the number ready, but she didn't need it. She'd read it enough times this week that it had lodged.
That account's always been like this.
Ruth kept sorting, blue tops on one hook, green on the next, a rhythm that didn't break for the question. Mars waited for the rest of it. There wasn't a rest of it.
12 days on a 3-day promise. That's not late. That's 9 days past late.
She said again, quieter, like saying it slower might make it land as strange to Ruth the way it had landed on her.
I know how math works.
Ruth finally turned, and there was no heat in it, which was somehow worse than if there had been. It was the voice of somebody explaining something so old it had stopped being a fact and become weather.
Cortland's been like this since before you were hired. Before the last 2 people who had your job were hired. Somebody up front always ends up smoothing it over, and it always gets smoothed over, and next month it'll be 12 days again. You want to fix Cortland, you're going to need to fix about 6 other things first, and I don't have 6 other things worth of time today. You need something back here or not?
Devon Okafor showed up a little after 5, the way he always did lately, like the building had a gravity to it he hadn't quite admitted to yet. He came in through the front instead of the dock. He didn't have a reason to know there was a difference. Laptop bag over one shoulder, already halfway into a sentence about parking before the door had shut behind him.
Your website is held together with what I can only describe as vibes.
He said it like a diagnosis, not a complaint. The particular tone he used for problems he found interesting instead of merely broken.
You said you'd take a look at the email thing.
Mars fell into step beside him, glad, in a way she hadn't examined too closely, to be talking to someone who'd known her before any of this. Before the dock, before Ruth's flat voice, before 12 days had started to feel like a normal number for something to be late.
I did say that.
He found an open spot at one of the front office desks, the one nobody claimed after 5, and set his laptop down like he was moving into a rental.
Customer confirmation emails. Nothing's going out.
Since when?
According to the one complaint email that got forwarded to me 11 times before anyone thought to just ask a person who knows HTML. Since Tuesday. Possibly longer. Nobody would notice a silent failure like this until a customer called asking where their receipt was.
He was already typing, the fast, unhurried kind of typing that didn't look like it was accomplishing anything until you noticed the screen had changed twice.
This site is running code from an era when people still argued about frames versus tables. I'm mostly amazed it does anything at all.
Mars leaned against the edge of the desk, watching without understanding much of what she was watching. Lines of text, a browser window, a second window with more text, and found she didn't mind not understanding it. It wasn't like watching Ruth's rack, hook by hook, a system she was locked out of by seniority. This was just a language she hadn't learned yet.
There, found it.
Devon sat back.
Somebody edited the confirmation template by hand at some point, probably in like 2015, and broke the part that actually triggers the send. It's not that the emails are wrong. It's that nothing tells the system to send them at all.
He typed a few more lines, then looked up.
Give me an order number, any real one.
She gave him one off the manifest still folded in her back pocket. He ran it. A few seconds passed. Then, on his own phone, propped against the laptop, a notification lit up. A test inbox, an email that had actually visibly arrived.
There it is.
He said with the small satisfaction of a man who liked problems that ended.
Fixed. It'll go out to customers again starting now, and probably nobody upstream will ever know it was broken.
He said it lightly, but something in the sentence caught him on the way past. She watched it catch, watched the half-second where his face did something more thoughtful than the joke he'd just made.
Which is, actually, how many other things around here work like that? Something breaks quietly. Somebody eventually notices from the outside, and nobody in the building knows until a customer complains?
You're asking the wrong person. I've been here 2 weeks.
2 weeks, and you already know the shipping schedule better than the website did.
He was still looking at the screen, but she could tell he wasn't really seeing it anymore. He was looking past it, at the shape of the building behind it.
How does an order even get from somebody called it in to a box on a truck? Is that written down anywhere, or is it just...
He gestured, a loose circle that took in the desks, the racks, the whole front office, and Mars read it as all of this, all of you people, held together the way the website was.
Mostly, it's in Ruth's head. And a binder. And whatever's actually sitting on a shelf, which doesn't always agree with either one.
Devon looked at her for a second too long, the look of someone doing arithmetic he hadn't meant to start. Hal was on the phone when she reached his desk, one hand cupped loosely over the receiver like it made a difference in a room with no walls.
No, I hear you. I'll get you an answer today.
He hung up, exhaled through his nose, and looked at her like he'd forgotten, and then remembered in the same second why he'd called her over.
Vega, question for you.
He said it the way he'd say, "Hand me that," not like it cost him anything to ask.
Okay.
Delgado's decorating vendor. The screen printer out on 53rd. We've had 2 boxes come back from them light. Not damaged, not wrong item, just short. Case says 24, box has 22.
He rubbed the back of his neck.
Ruth says it's the vendor shorting us on purpose, cutting corners because we don't count careful enough to catch it. I don't know. Does that sound like something you'd see?
Mars hadn't been past the shipping corner's swinging half door in a week that wasn't a delivery. So walking into the front office on a Tuesday afternoon, for no reason she could name, had felt like showing up in someone else's kitchen. It was a different room in every way that mattered. Back in fulfillment, the light came in flat and grey off the dock, and everything had a place because everything had to. Pallet jack here, scale there, the crash cart of restock boxes wedged where it wouldn't catch a forklift. Up front, the light came through the old retail windows, dusty gold, and Hal's desk sat in the middle of it, like the room had been built around it instead of the other way. 2 admin desks flanked it at a polite distance. A counter ran along the far wall, chest high, worn pale in a stripe where forearms had rested on it for 30 years of customers nobody saw anymore. Nobody had told her to come up. She was here because Hal had waved her over on his way past the dock, the same easy wave he'd give a delivery driver, and said, "Got a sec?" Like it was nothing. She had a sec. She didn't have anywhere else she was supposed to be more. None of it was hers by any measure the org chart would recognize. Not her account. Not her vendor. Not her paperwork. But it was the kind of thing that happened at the dock, and the dock was the one place in this building she actually knew cold.
Depends. You count in or you count out?
Hal blinked.
What?
When the vendor box comes in, does anybody open it and count before it goes on the shelf? Or does it just get shelved as however many the manifest says?
Shelved as the manifest says, far as I know.
Then you don't know if it's the vendor shorting you or somebody here miscounting a restock and the shelf just reading high for a while before it catches up to true.
She heard herself say it and felt the small, specific satisfaction of being right about something nobody had asked her opinion on.
I'd want to know if it's happened with any other vendor or just theirs. If it's just theirs, maybe it's them. If it's happened with somebody else too, and nobody noticed till now. It's probably us not counting.
Hal was quiet for a second in a way that felt different from his usual quiet, not distracted, not moving on to the next thing already, looking at her like he was recalculating something.
Yeah, that's a better question than the one I was asking.
I don't know if it's right. I just know what I'd check first.
It's right enough to ask Frank to pull the receiving logs instead of Ruth chewing out a vendor. She can't prove did anything.
He said it almost to himself, already half turned back toward his desk, already somewhere past her in his own head. Then he stopped and looked at her again, longer this time.
You always think about it like that? Count in, count out?
It's how you'd run a walk-in cooler.
She hadn't meant to say it. It came out before she'd decided whether the comparison was allowed in this room.
You don't trust what the sheet says. You trust what's on the shelf. Sheet's wrong all the time. Shelf doesn't lie. It's just slow to update.
Something in Hal's face eased, like she'd confirmed a thing he'd already half decided without telling her.
Yeah, that's about right.
He didn't write anything down. He didn't tell her to follow up on it or come find him with an answer. He just turned back to his desk, picked the receiver back up and said into it,
Deb, get me Frank for a second.
Like the conversation with Mars had already been filed somewhere and closed. Mars stood there a beat longer than she needed to, in the gold light, in the room that wasn't hers, waiting to see if there was a second half to this that required her to still be standing here. There wasn't. Hal was talking to Frank now, already onto shorted box logistics, and she was just a person near his desk. She should have gone back to the dock. She didn't, not yet. One of the admin desks was close enough that the woman behind it, Mars didn't know her name, someone who answered phones and typed things Mars had never had reason to read, glanced up at her without much interest and went back to her screen. Nobody in this room had blinked at Hal pulling a shipping clerk into a vendor question. That was the thing about the front office. Nothing happened privately in it. Every phone call, every question, every stray thought Hal had out loud carried the length of the room and landed on whoever was in earshot. Admin desks and walk-in counter and Mars alike. If Hal made a habit of this, everyone here would know before she did. She thought, unbidden, of her grandfather's hand on the ledger book, the way he used to slide it toward her like a question that was really an offer. She'd said no to that. This wasn't that. Nobody was handing her a book. Nobody was asking her to take anything on. It was one question about shorted boxes, answered and done. But she noted, the way she'd note a pot starting to steam before it boiled, that it hadn't felt like nothing. It had felt like being asked because he wanted to know, not because it was her job to be asked. She went back through the swinging half door to the dock, back to the flat grey light and the smell of cardboard and cold coffee, and told herself that was the end of it. A question, an answer, a man returning to his phone call. She had a stack of afternoon manifests to work through and a pallet that needed restrapping before 4. Mars had the shelving half rebuilt when the phone in the front office started ringing and didn't stop. She could hear it from the shipping corner the way she could hear everything in this building. No walls that went all the way to the ceiling, no door that latched all the way shut. 3 weeks in, and she still hadn't decided if that was a design flaw or just what happened to a building nobody had ever planned, only added on to. The ringing cut off. Hal's voice came through a beat later, pitched higher than his usual front counter drawl.
No, ma'am, I hear you. I do.
Mars set down the shelf bracket she'd been threading and didn't move toward the front office. Not her call to take, but she didn't go back to the bracket either.
No, that should not have gone out looking like that.
A pause, longer.
I understand what department color means to you people. I do understand that. This isn't. Give me the afternoon. Please, I will have an answer for you by the afternoon.
Whoever was on the other end talked for a while. Mars caught none of it, just the shape of Hal's silence, which was its own kind of information. He wasn't a man who went quiet easily. Then he hung up and she heard him say to nobody.
Christ.
He came around the corner into the shipping area 2 minutes later with a box already in his hands, held out in front of him like it had personally offended him. It was one of theirs, Winslow's return label slapped crooked over the original shipping sticker, the kind of thing that happened when a driver or a warehouse kid didn't care enough to line it up.
Tell me what I'm looking at.
and set it on the folding table between them. Mars flipped the lid. Inside, scrub tops, still folded from the printer, still smelling faintly of the heat press. Navy blue, every one of them, banded in plastic in stacks of 10. Taped to the top stack was the packing slip, and stapled to that was a smaller printed tag, a swatch of color, a department code, a ship to. Mars flipped the lid. Inside, scrub tops, still folded from the printer, still smelling faintly of the heat press. Navy blue, every one of them, banded in plastic in stacks of 10. Taped to the top stack was the packing slip, and stapled to that was a smaller printed tag, a swatch of color, a department code, a ship to. The tag was purple, the scrubs were navy.
This came back?
Half of it came back. The other half's already on their floor, near as I can tell, which is worse.
Hal rubbed the back of his neck.
Purple's their surgical unit. That's what the tag says. That's what she ordered. That's what we quoted. Navy's, I don't even know what Navy is over there. Environmental services, maybe. Doesn't matter. It's the wrong department for a hospital that puts people through operating rooms, Mars. They color code that stuff so a nurse doesn't have to guess who's cleared to be standing where. It's not decoration. It's how they keep track of who's supposed to touch what.
He said it plainly, like a fact he'd had explained to him more than once and had finally absorbed. Mars turned the tag over like there might be something on the back that would make it make sense. There wasn't. Purple tag, navy garment, banded together like they'd always belonged that way. He said it plainly, like a fact he'd had explained to him more than once and had finally absorbed. Mars turned the tag over like there might be something on the back that would make it make sense. There wasn't. Purple tag, navy garment, banded together like they'd always belonged that way.
This is the rush.
Not a question exactly. She'd heard him on the phone about it 2 days running, a doctor's office, a promise made too fast, an order Hal had personally walked back to have bumped ahead of everything else in the queue.
This is the rush. Dr. Marsh's office. Regional system, half a dozen departments, and I told her Tuesday to be there Thursday. And it was there Thursday, and it's wrong.
He said it flat, but his jaw was doing something that wasn't flat at all. He said it flat, but his jaw was doing something that wasn't flat at all.
She's not going to fire us over one box, but she's not going to trust us with the next one either, and there's a next one every quarter if we don't burn this.
Mars set the lid back down over the scrub tops, careful, like closing it gently might undo something.
So what do we do?
What we do is I find out who packed this.
Hal was already turning, already reaching for the clipboard hanging off the end of the shelving. The paper order book, 3-hole punched pages gone soft at the corners from handling, the only place a ship date for this order existed outside somebody's memory. He flipped pages back with his thumb fast, hunting a date.
Everything's logged, slower than it ought to be, but it's logged. I find whoever pulled this batch, I find out how a purple tag ended up strapped to a Navy stack, and I have a conversation with them today, not tomorrow. Today.
You think somebody just grabbed wrong?
I think somebody's in a hurry, same as everybody else in this building. And in a hurry is when you grab the tag sitting on top of the pile instead of the one that matches what's in your hands.
He didn't look up from the order book.
It happens. It's not supposed to happen on a hospital account, but it happens, and the fix is you find out who it was, and you make damn sure they understand what department color means before they touch another rush job. I built relationships with these people one call at a time, Mars. I'm not losing one because somebody wasn't paying attention for 4 seconds. It happens. It's not supposed to happen on a hospital account, but it happens, and the fix is you find out who it was, and you make damn sure they understand what department color means before they touch another rush job. I built relationships with these people one call at a time, Mars. I'm not losing one because somebody wasn't paying attention for 4 seconds.
He said it the way he said most things, like a problem that had a shape he already recognized, one he'd handled 100 times with somebody who owed him a favor and a firm handshake. Not angry, exactly. Certain. He wasn't a man who reached for a system when a person would do. Mars had watched him solve smaller messes than this, with nothing but a phone call and his own memory for who'd been where. This was that instinct, just louder, because this time the person on the other end of the phone had used the word compliance. Mars didn't say anything. There wasn't anything for her to say yet. Nobody had asked her opinion, and she didn't have one to offer, not really. She had a box with a purple tag on navy scrubs, and a boss flipping through a paper log for a name, and an itch she couldn't have named if someone had asked her to.
Get me Frank.
I didn't grab wrong.
Terry had the step stool out already at the far shelving, the tall run along the back wall that held the promo apparel stock, one boot on the bottom rung, restocking a case of golf towels like nothing in the building had happened in the last 2 hours, until Mars said, "Got a second?" And Terry looked down at her, then past her, checking whether anyone else was coming too. Nobody was.
That the Marsh thing?
Terry already knew the answer. The words just hadn't caught up to the face yet. Mars nodded anyway.
That's the Marsh thing.
Hal hadn't told Mars to go find Terry, not in so many words, but he'd said, "Get me Frank," and then, 10 minutes later, passing back through the shipping corner with the order book still open in his hand, he'd said, half to her and half to the air, "Terry pulled that batch, near as the log says." The same Terry Mars had seen most mornings working the tall shelving at the back wall, quick-handed with a case of golf towels, and kept walking. Mars had stood there with a roll of packing tape in her hand and decided that counted as being asked. Terry stepped down off the stool. Up close, older than Mars had clocked from across the corner, the kind of older that came from years, not decades, of doing this exact motion, reach and pull and check, until the body stopped needing to think about it. Terry wiped both palms on a pair of jeans, gone soft and grey at the thighs from cardboard dust.
I didn't say you did.
You're standing here, though. Hal's got the book out. I know what that means. Somebody packed a purple tag on navy scrubs and now somebody's getting the conversation. And I already know who that somebody's going to be if I don't say something first.
Terry's arms came up, not quite crossed, more like bracing. Mars kept her hands loose at her sides, the way she used to stand when a line cook got hot about a fired ticket. Not backing off, just not adding fuel.
So tell me, what'd you pull?
Slot 41.
Terry didn't have to think about it, which Mars noted the way she'd note a cook who didn't have to check the recipe. Either they knew it that well, or they'd already rehearsed the answer. She couldn't tell which from here.
Navy scrubs, department code purple, tag stapled right to the poly bag like always. I scanned what was in front of me. There wasn't a scanner,
A short, humorless breath, almost a laugh.
You know what I mean. I read what was in front of me. Tag said purple. Slot said 41. Order sheet said 41. I pulled 41, taped the box, sent it up front. That's the whole job. That's all 4 seconds of it.
And slot 41 is supposed to be...
Slot 41's supposed to be whatever the shelf card says it's supposed to be.
Terry turned and walked 2 rows over, and Mars followed, past cases of polos and visors gone soft-cornered from handling, to a run of open cubbies with handwritten index cards taped under each one. Slot 38, slot 39, slot 40, slot 41, black marker gone a little grey with age. Terry tapped the card under 41, navy, depped purple, in handwriting that wasn't Terry's. Mars could tell that much just from the difference in how the letters leaned.
That card's been like that since before I started pulling this account. I didn't write it. I didn't check it against anything, because there's nothing to check it against. No computer's going to tell me the card's wrong. The card's the only thing there is. I pulled what the card told me was in that slot, and what was in that slot matched what the card said. Navy shirt, purple code, right there together like they'd always been that way.
Mars looked at the card. Somebody's handwriting, gone a little grey, stapled once, curling slightly at one corner where the tape had lost its grip years ago. It didn't look wrong. It didn't look like anything except old. Mars looked at the card. Somebody's handwriting, gone a little grey, stapled once, curling slightly at one corner where the tape had lost its grip years ago. It didn't look wrong. It didn't look like anything except old.
So either the card's wrong, or somebody shelved navy in a purple slot before you ever touched it.
That's not my end of it to figure out. My end of it is, I pulled what was there.
Terry's voice hadn't gone loud, but something under it had gone tight. The specific tightness of somebody who'd already run this exact conversation twice in their own head before Mars showed up to have it out loud.
I've been pulling this shelf 2 years. I know Marsh's account. I know purple means surgical. I know why that matters. I'm not an idiot. I didn't decide today was the day to stop reading tags. Whatever happened, happened before this got to me.
Mars believed it. That was the trouble. She stood there with her hand near the edge of the cubby, not quite touching the card, and turned the two versions over the way she used to turn a ticket over, looking for the missing modifier, no onions, easy sauce, trying to see if it had been misread or if the ticket itself had come out of the printer wrong. Terry's account didn't wobble anywhere. No detail added on a second pass, no new specifics volunteered that a person reaches for when they're building a story instead of remembering one. But she'd also never worked this corner long enough to know what Terry sounded like, telling the truth versus telling something that just happened to be shaped like it. She had no baseline. She had a co-worker's face, steady enough, and a card that could have been wrong for 1 day or wrong for 2 years, and nothing in her hands that could tell the difference. If she walked back to Hal and said Terry's clean, it's the shelf, and she was wrong. If Terry had grabbed careless in a hurry and dressed it up clean for her because she was new enough to believe it, then she'd just told her boss to stop looking at the person who actually did it. And if she said something's off with the shelving and that turned out to be nothing, she'd have put a mark on Ruth's operation with nothing behind it but a 2-year-old index card and a hunch. Either way, it wasn't her name on the invoice. It would just be her red that sent Hal one direction or the other, and she'd been working here 5 weeks.
You gonna tell him it's the shelf?
Not quite a challenge. Closer to hope, worn thin.
You gonna tell him it's the shelf?
Not quite a challenge. Closer to hope, worn thin.
I'm gonna tell him what you told me. That's it. That's all I've got to give him.
Terry didn't look satisfied with that, but didn't argue either, just nodded once, short, and reached back for the step stool like the conversation had used up whatever it was going to use up, and the golf towels still needed restocking, regardless of who was at fault for the Marsh order. Mars stood a moment longer at slot 41, looking at the card, at the staple, at the small grey curl of tape at the corner, and didn't touch it. Whatever it could tell her, it wasn't going to tell her today, not by looking. She went to find Hal with nothing solved and both hands empty, and told herself that not knowing was still a kind of answer, even if it wasn't the one anybody wanted from her yet. Mars bothered him.
I need the Marsh order, invoices, whatever the system spit out, and the vendor stuff, phone, fax, whatever Frank Jr. in receiving swears he emailed.
Frank had a spot at the end of the long table where the sun came in wrong, and he never moved it. Twice a week he sat there with a shoebox of receipts and a laptop that took 4 minutes to wake up, and twice a week nobody bothered him.
The healthcare account, the one that...
He didn't finish it. He didn't have to. Everybody in the building knew which order had gone sideways by now. It just hadn't occurred to anyone that the fix might live in a shoebox.
That one.
I do books. This isn't really my...
Which was true, and which was also, Mars had learned, the sound he made right before he did something that wasn't books.
You cut the check for the rush freight charge. That makes it yours for the next 20 minutes.
He gave her a look that said he wanted a caveat on the record. This doesn't mean I'm signing off on anything. And didn't say it out loud and got up anyway. That was Frank. Hedge first, help second, but help. They didn't have a room for this. Winslow's didn't have rooms, period. Hal had built the place as one long floor because he liked being able to see everybody, and the side effect was that anything anybody said out loud belonged to the whole building. Right now, that suited Mars fine. Hal's desk sat empty at the far end, chair pushed in, which meant whatever this turned into, at least it wouldn't turn into an audience. Frank came back with 3 things: a folder of invoices, a printout from the order tracking spreadsheet. It lived in Access now, technically, but everyone still called it the spreadsheet because that's what it had been for the first 6 years. And a second folder, thinner, rubber-banded, that he set down like it might be contagious.
That's the vendor log.
That's not a log. That's an envelope.
It's phone notes, some fax confirmations. I think there's an email in there I printed because the printer was already on.
He shrugged, apologetic, like the informality was a personal failing.
Nobody ever asked me to make it a real system.
Mars pulled a chair around to his side of the table instead of across from him. She wanted the documents facing the same way he saw them, not fighting him for the right side up. She'd learned that trick from the pass window. You didn't argue with the cook about a ticket. You turned it so you were both reading it the same direction.
Invoice first.
Frank slid it over. Dated, itemized, boring. The healthcare reorder, the standard SKUs, nothing about it that screamed anything.
This is when we billed it.
Right, which is after we shipped it, not when we got it.
Frank tapped the top line, hedging even in agreement.
Invoices always lag. That's normal lag.
Fine, show me the spreadsheet.
The printout was uglier. A grid of order numbers, dates, a status column that changed vocabulary depending on who'd typed into it that week. Mars had spent 5 years learning to read shelf tags in 3 different handwritings. This wasn't so different, just typed instead of scrawled. She found the marsh line and put her finger on it.
Order dates here, ship dates here. That's a decent gap, longer than the stuff around it.
Longer how much?
She checked the rows above and below it, other orders, other accounts, going in and out in the 2-3 days you'd expect. The Marsh order sat there like it had waited.
Days longer. It came in and then it just...
She didn't have the word yet.
It sat.
Maybe it was back-ordered.
Then it'd say back-ordered. It says received.
She tapped the status column.
Received, then nothing, then shipped. No reason logged for the gap.
Frank reached past her and turned the printout 90 degrees, which she hadn't asked him to do, and which turned out to be useful. From that angle she could see the row above the marsh line, and the row below it lined up like a fence, evenly spaced, ordinary orders moving through on schedule, and the marsh order sitting crooked in the middle of them like a fence post nobody had set straight.
Okay, now the envelope.
Frank untied the rubber band like he was defusing something. Inside, a scrap of notepaper with a phone message scrawled in handwriting that wasn't his. Dr. Marsh OFC called, need reorder ASAP, HW will call back. A fax confirmation sheet with a timestamp printed faint along the top edge, and one printed email, 3 lines long, from someone at the vendor confirming a shipment had gone out.
Whose handwriting?
Whoever answered the phone. Could have been anybody. We don't log who takes a message, we just take it.
Another hedge, offered before she'd even accused the system of anything.
Nobody's hiding the ball here, Mars. It's just how we've always done it. Nobody's hiding the ball here, Mars. It's just how we've always done it.
I know.
And she did. Frank wasn't the kind of nervous that meant guilty. He was the kind of nervous that meant please don't make this my fault, and those weren't the same animal. She'd fired one and kept the other back at the restaurant, and she still knew the difference on sight.
I'm not asking who wrote it. I'm asking when.
The fax confirmation had a timestamp. She laid it next to the phone message and laid both of those next to the spreadsheet printout, so all 3 sat in a row under the window light. Invoice pushed to the side now, out of the way, its lag explained and done with.
Read me the fax time.
2:40 the 11th.
Frank read it twice, like he didn't trust it either.
Afternoon, that's...
Huh, what?
That's the same day the status changed, on the sheet.
He pulled the printout back toward himself and ran his finger down the date column, hedging even now. Could be coincidence, dates line up on plenty of. And then stopped hedging, because it wasn't plenty of anything. It was one line.
Same day. Couple hours after maybe, going by when the status field updated.
Mars felt the thing she used to feel on a Friday night when the tickets started backing up, and she could see, before anyone else in the kitchen could see it, exactly which one was about to get fired out of order. A rush ticket didn't belong in a print queue mid-run. Somebody had to physically pull it and shove it to the front. And when they did, everything behind it got a little later and nobody wrote down why. Because the why wasn't a mistake, it was a decision, and decisions didn't get logged the way mistakes did.
Say it doesn't sit in queue like the others. Say somebody pulls it out of sequence, on purpose, right after this call comes in.
You think somebody skipped the line?
I think somebody let it skip the line.
She picked up the phone message again, HW will call back, and set it down like it weighed more than paper should. Hal's initials. Hal on the phone, promising Dr. Marsh's office he'd handle it personally, and then... what? Walked it back to the floor himself? Told somebody to? The note didn't say, and she wasn't going to invent the rest of it sitting here.
I'm not saying that's what happened. I just cut a check. I don't know who moved what.
Both hands up off the table now like he wanted to be on record as not having said it.
I know, you didn't say it.
She was already sliding the 3 documents into a line she could carry in her head without carrying the papers. The morning call, the status change, the fax that afternoon confirming it, the note with Hal's initials tying all 3 together.
But it's sitting right here.
Frank looked at the row of paper like it had gotten louder than he expected bookkeeping to get. He didn't ask her what it meant. Mars didn't tell him because she didn't have the rest of it yet. Not why an order jumping the line on Hal's say-so was a problem bigger than one healthcare reorder. Not what it meant that nobody upstream had a name for what had just happened to this ticket. All she had was the shape of it. Something had reached into the middle of the batch and pulled this one forward, and whatever came next, it hadn't started on the shelf. She folded the fax confirmation back into the envelope, but kept the spreadsheet printout, and stood up already thinking about who else in the building would know what ASAP meant when Hal was the one saying it. Mars still had the spreadsheet printout folded in her hand when she crossed into print decoration staging, and she was still turning the timeline over. Received, then nothing, then shipped, same afternoon as the fax, when she found Ruth elbow-deep in a bin of stock blanks, sorting them by some system that lived nowhere but her own head.
Got a minute?
I've got the Delacroix reorder going out today, so no, not really. What?
The Marsh order. The healthcare reorder that jumped the queue. I know it got mixed into a batch mid-run instead of going in normal sequence. I'm trying to find where that happened, physically, whose hands it went through.
Ruth's hands stopped moving. Quietly, almost carefully, she set the blank she was holding down on the stack. Square, corners aligned, the kind of small, precise motion that told you somebody was buying half a second to decide what came out of their mouth next. When she turned around, her arms were already crossed.
Batch mixing happens here. Where else would it happen?
I know it happens here. I'm asking how. Whether it's you who sequences what goes out for decoration, or whether...
It's me. 15 years, it's been me. Nobody else touches the staging order. Nobody else knows which accounts can't go out together, which vendors are backed up, which blanks are the right blanks, not just the ones that look right on a packing slip. You want to know how batches get sequenced? I sequence them, in my head. Because writing it down never once helped anybody do the job better, it just gave people something to second guess.
I'm not second-guessing.
You're standing here with a printout asking me to explain myself.
Ruth's voice had gone hard in a way Mars hadn't heard from her before. Not even the day she'd waved off the healthcare account with a shrug and a "that's always been like this." This wasn't dismissiveness, this was a door slamming.
You've been here 5 minutes and you're already convinced there's a process problem back here somewhere. And I'm telling you, there isn't. I know exactly where every order in this building is at every hour of every day. I have never once lost track of a batch.
I didn't say you lost anything.
You didn't have to say it.
Ruth picked the blank back up, set it down again in a different spot, like her hands needed somewhere to go that wasn't pointing at Mars.
I know how this works. Something goes wrong, somebody comes back here with a clipboard, and all of a sudden 15 years of doing this right doesn't count for anything unless I can produce a piece of paper that proves it.
Nobody's asking for a piece of paper.
Then what are you asking for? Because from where I'm standing, you found a hole in somebody's fancy spreadsheet, and now you're back here in my area looking for somewhere to put the blame, and I've got a decade and a half of orders that never once got mixed up on account of anything I did, and I'm not going to stand here and let you write me into whatever story you're building just because I'm the one who can't hand you a form for it.
Ruth picked the blank back up, set it down again in a different spot, like her hands needed somewhere to go that wasn't pointing at Mars.
I know how this works. Something goes wrong, somebody comes back here with a clipboard, and all of a sudden 15 years of doing this right doesn't count for anything unless I can produce a piece of paper that proves it.
Nobody's asking for a piece of paper.
Then what are you asking for? Because from where I'm standing, you found a hole in somebody's fancy spreadsheet, and now you're back here in my area looking for somewhere to put the blame, and I've got a decade and a half of orders that never once got mixed up on account of anything I did, and I'm not going to stand here and let you write me into whatever story you're building just because I'm the one who can't hand you a form for it.
Mars held still. She'd meant this as a fact-finding stop. 5 minutes, figure out the physical handoff, move on. and instead she was standing in the middle of something that felt like it had been loaded a long time before she walked in. Ruth wasn't answering the question so much as defending the ground she was standing on, and Mars couldn't tell, watching her arms stay crossed and her jaw stay set, whether that was because there was something back here worth defending against, or because being asked to explain 15 years of judgment calls felt to Ruth like being told none of it had ever counted. Maybe both. Maybe neither. From the past, Mars had known cooks who got twitchy the second anyone questioned their station. Some of them because they'd cut a corner and didn't want it found, some of them because they'd built their whole sense of themselves on nobody ever needing to ask. She used to be able to tell the two apart inside a sentence. She wasn't sure yet which one she was looking at now.
I'm not trying to build a story. I'm trying to find out what happened to one order.
Then go find out. I've got the Delacroix run to finish.
Ruth turned back to the bin of blanks, shoulders square, already sorting again, and didn't offer anything else. No explanation of the sequencing, no walkthrough of how a rush got folded into a batch. Nothing. The conversation was over whether Mars was done with it or not. Mars stood there another second with the printout still folded in her hand, then let it go. Not the question, just the pushing on it, for now. Whatever had just happened, it hadn't answered anything. It hadn't closed anything off either. She left Ruth to the blanks and went to find out who else might know. Mars found the butcher paper in the same closet as the shipping tape, 3 rolls deep behind a box of static cling stickers nobody had ordered in a year. She tore off a length as long as she was tall and carried it to the break room because it was the only wall in the building that wasn't already covered in something. A shift calendar nobody updated. A laminated sign about the coffee maker that predated the coffee maker currently in use. She taped the top corners first, then the bottom, smoothing the crease out of the middle with the flat of her hand. The way she'd flattened dough she didn't trust. Hal wanted a name by the end of the day. He'd said it like that. A name, like the mislabeled boxes for Dr. Marsh's office, were a dish that had come back wrong and somebody just needed to be sent back to the line. She uncapped a marker and wrote quote in the top left corner, because that was where Frank said it started, and drew a line to PO approval, because that was next, and then stood there with the marker bleeding a small dot into the paper, because she wasn't actually sure what came after that. Art proof. She wrote it down anyway and kept going. Art proof. To decorator production, to QC, to fulfillment, to invoice. A chain of boxes strung across 4 feet of paper like a ticket rail, except every cook on this rail was a different person in a different room who'd never once compared notes with the others. She uncapped a marker and wrote quote in the top left corner, because that was where Frank said it started, and drew a line to PO approval, because that was next, and then stood there with the marker bleeding a small dot into the paper, because she wasn't actually sure what came after that. Art proof. She wrote it down anyway and kept going. Art proof. To decorator production, to QC, to fulfillment, to invoice. A chain of boxes strung across 4 feet of paper like a ticket rail, except every cook on this rail was a different person in a different room who'd never once compared notes with the others. She stepped back. It looked complete. It looked like something you could hand to Hal. It wasn't complete. She could feel the gap in it the way she used to feel a station that was 2 pans short before service. Nothing visibly wrong yet, just a wrongness with no shape she could point to. The door swung and Dale Prentice came in, still wearing his gloves, the fingertips grey with cardboard dust. He didn't say anything about the paper. He went to the coffee maker, found it empty, and started the next pot without any particular hurry. The way a man does a thing he's done 4,000 times.
Somebody finally draw it out.
Trying to. Where's it wrong?
Dale looked at the wall the way he'd look at a shelf he was about to restock. Not impressed, not unimpressed, just reading it. He nodded at the space between fulfillment and QC.
Nothing checks the box against the ticket before it goes out. Never has. Whoever's packing reads what's in front of them and packs it, rush or not. Nobody after them looks twice.
Mars stood very still.
Nobody.
Nobody's job to. Pack station's pack station. QC's a stamp somebody signs, not somebody who opens the box back up.
Mars looked at the gap between the 2 boxes she'd drawn. Fulfillment, QC, a straight line connecting them, like the line meant something was actually happening along it. She'd interviewed the picker 2 days ago in this same building, and the kid had sworn up and down that the shelf was already wrong before his hands ever touched it. And she'd half believed him and half didn't, because somebody had to be lying and there wasn't anybody else standing there to lie. She uncapped the marker and drew a second line, this one from the gap straight down to a blank stretch of paper below the chain, and in the empty space she wrote, "Who checks?" She'd interviewed the picker 2 days ago in this same building, and the kid had sworn up and down that the shelf was already wrong before his hands ever touched it. And she'd half believed him and half didn't, because somebody had to be lying and there wasn't anybody else standing there to lie. She uncapped the marker and drew a second line, this one from the gap straight down to a blank stretch of paper below the chain, and in the empty space she wrote, "Who checks?" Then she looked at what she'd written and didn't like it, because it read like a question aimed at a person, and Dale hadn't described a person. He'd described a hole, nobody's job to. She crossed out "Who checks" and wrote underneath it, smaller, "Nobody does." It sat there on the paper, looking exactly as flimsy and exactly as true as it had sounded out of Dale's mouth 30 seconds ago, and Mars understood, with the specific cold water clarity of a ticket coming back for the third time in one night, that this wasn't about the picker at all. It had never been about the picker. It wasn't even about whoever had shelved the order wrong, if anyone had. It was about the fact that a wrong label could travel the entire length of that 4-foot paper chain, quote to invoice, and nobody standing anywhere along it had a job whose whole purpose was to catch it. That wasn't a person's mistake. That was a shape the building didn't have. She heard Ruth's voice from the staging area, sharp about something to do with thread count, too far off to make out the words. The whole building carried sound like that, nothing private in it anywhere. And Mars realized she had maybe 10 minutes before somebody else wandered in here on a break and saw "Nobody does" written under a question mark on the break room wall in her handwriting, and she found she didn't especially care. Let them see it. It was the first thing all week that felt like it was actually true. She heard Ruth's voice from the staging area, sharp about something to do with thread count, too far off to make out the words. The whole building carried sound like that, nothing private in it anywhere. And Mars realized she had maybe 10 minutes before somebody else wandered in here on a break and saw "Nobody does" written under a question mark on the break room wall in her handwriting, and she found she didn't especially care. Let them see it. It was the first thing all week that felt like it was actually true. She capped the marker for good this time and went to find Frank, because if nobody checked the box against the ticket, she wanted to know whether that was true only for rush orders, or whether it had always, quietly, been true for every single one.
Found something better than an excuse.
Mars pulled the second chair around so she was sitting at the corner of Hal's desk instead of across from it, the way Ruth sat when she wanted Hal to actually look at something instead of just listening.
Frank's got the timestamps. That scrub top order got pulled off the normal line and shoved into the middle of a batch. Not because anybody in shipping decided that, because somebody told sales it needed to move faster than the batch was moving.
Hal had been at his desk, with the phone cradled against his shoulder when she came in, not talking, just holding it there the way he did when he was thinking about calling someone and hadn't decided yet. Mars had learned that posture in 3 weeks. It meant leave him alone unless it's worth interrupting. She decided it was worth interrupting.
Got a minute?
For you, sure. Tell me you found our picker a nice clean excuse.
That was when she'd told him about the timestamps.
That'd be me. Elaine's office called direct. I told them we'd take care of it. That's not new, Mars. That's Tuesday.
Right. That's the part I want to ask you about. When you told them we'll take care of it, what did that mean back here? Who'd you tell?
Hal's easy look didn't move much, but something behind it did. A half second where he was working out whether this was still a friendly conversation.
Didn't tell anybody anything specific. I told Ruth to bump it up the list. She knows what that means.
Does she, though? Because I asked Dale about it yesterday. He's worked receiving for years. He didn't know rush meant anything different than any other order going through that corner. Nobody back there does. It's not written down anywhere that a rush order gets handled any different than a regular one. No different bin, no flag, no second look. It just gets shoved to the front of a line that was never built to have anybody cut in front of it.
So Ruth bumps it up. Somebody grabs it faster than they'd otherwise grab it, and
And that's the whole translation. Bump it up to Ruth, in her head, means the same thing it's always meant. Get to it sooner. It doesn't mean check it twice, because nobody ever told her Rush needs a different kind of care, not just a different place in line. You promised Elaine's office something on the phone that never turned into an instruction anybody in the building could actually act on differently. It just turned into speed. And speed's exactly what broke it.
that's Mars. That's how it's worked for 15 years. Somebody calls, I make it happen. Everybody downstream does their part. That's not a broken system. That's just how you run a shop like this.
Except this time, it went out with the wrong department color on a hospital order. I'm not saying you did anything wrong picking up the phone. I'm saying what you said on that phone call and what happened in the shipping corner weren't the same thing, and nobody in the building would have been able to tell you that, because nobody's ever had to translate between the two.
You're telling me I did this. I've been closing deals like that since before you were pulling shifts anywhere. Client calls, you tell them yes, you figure out the how after. That's the whole business. That's not a whole, that's just selling.
I know it's worked before. I'm not saying it hasn't. I'm saying I can't find the place where we'll take care of it. Turns into anything the floor can actually use different from a normal order. And if I can't find it, I don't think it exists yet.
It exists. It's called me picking up the phone and making sure it gets done. This is one bad batch, Mars. One. We fix the label thing, we move on. You're describing 15 years of me doing my job like it's a design flaw.
I'm not trying to. I'm telling you what Frank's timestamps and what Dale said both point at the same time. That's not me deciding you did something wrong. That's just where the two things landed when I put them next to each other.
Get Ruth a clearer sign-off next time. That's the fix. Write it down if you want, I don't care. I've got a client to call back.
He dialed before she'd finished standing up, which was its own answer, the kind Ruth would have given her 3 weeks ago before either of them had any use for the other. A door closing without anybody slamming it. Mars picked up the chair she'd pulled around and set it back where it had come from, across the desk instead of beside it, and went to find Frank, because whatever had just happened between "we'll take care of it" and a mislabeled box of scrub tops, Hal had just told her, without meaning to, that he didn't want to be the one who'd found it. The building had gone quiet the way it did after 4, the kind of quiet that wasn't silence so much as fewer things running. The label printer off, the radio in staging off, just the cooler hum and her own feet on the concrete. Mars had the Marsh order paperwork in one hand, and without deciding to, a marker in the other. She didn't remember picking it up. Slot 41 was 3 steps away. She could see the card from here, soft at one corner, taped twice, the same card Terry had sworn was already wrong before he ever touched it. She was 2 steps closer before she caught herself moving. It would take 4 seconds. She knew that because Terry had told her, without meaning to, exactly how long the whole job took. Pull the tag, match the slot, tape the box, 4 seconds, done. She could cross out the wrong line on the card herself right now, in her own handwriting, and by morning nobody would ever have a reason to ask who'd caught it or how. The order was already shipped and already wrong. This wouldn't even fix that one. It would just mean the next order out of slot 41 didn't repeat it. Quiet, contained. The kind of fix you made because you were standing there and you could. The same as pulling a pan off a burner before it scorched instead of writing an incident report about the stove. She stood there with the marker capped in her hand and didn't move for a second. That was the whole problem. That was exactly the whole problem, standing here holding it. She'd spent 2 weeks telling herself Terry wasn't careless. He'd just pulled what the card told him to pull because there wasn't anything else there to check it against. She'd stood in the break room and watched Dale say the same thing about the entire building without even noticing he'd said it. Nobody after the picker looks twice, rush or not, because nobody's ever been anybody's job to. And here she was, alone after hours, marker in hand, about to be the exact thing she'd spent those 2 weeks writing down. One more person who saw a wrong card and just fixed it quietly, by hand, so nobody ever had to build anything that would catch it on its own. She uncapped the marker, looked at the card and put the cap back on. She didn't relabel it. She put the marker back on the folding table where she'd found it and stood there a minute longer, because leaving didn't feel like it finished anything, and neither did not fixing it. Both felt like just standing there. The building was still quiet when she came back the next morning, early enough that the lights over staging hadn't kicked on yet, early enough that it was just her and the cooler hum again, same as the night before, except now she wasn't holding anything. She hadn't relabeled the card. She also hadn't told anyone she'd almost done it, and that part sat worse than the almost doing had. If she hadn't caught herself, if the marker had been in her hand 1 second longer, nobody would ever have known there'd been a choice there at all. That was Ruth's whole defense when you got down to it. 15 years of catching things by hand, quietly, before anyone had to ask how. Mars had stood in the staging area 3 days ago, all but accusing her of hiding something. And the truth was, Ruth wasn't hiding anything. She was just doing, at scale and for 15 years, the exact thing Mars had almost done alone in the dark, with a marker. Mars didn't feel proud of herself for stopping. That was the part she made herself sit with, standing at slot 41 in the flat grey morning light with nothing in her hands. Stopping once wasn't a fix. It wasn't even a habit yet. It was one time she happened to notice. If she didn't do something with it besides feel bad about how close it had been, next time she might not stop. Or somebody else wouldn't. Somebody who'd been here a lot longer than 5 weeks and had a lot more reason to trust their own hands over a system that had never once been built to catch them. She thought about just fixing the card anyway, this morning, in daylight, and telling Hal about it after. A smaller version of the same thing, dressed up as honesty, because she'd confess it instead of hiding it. That wasn't it either. The wall map was still taped up in the break room, half a building's worth of process, drawn out in her own handwriting, waiting for the next line. She'd been treating it like something private, hers to keep adding to until it was finished enough to show somebody. But it wasn't going to get finished by her fixing one card at a time in an empty building at 6 in the morning. The whole point of drawing it out instead of just knowing it in her head was that other people were supposed to be able to see it too. She wasn't going to fix slot 41. She was going to go get Hal and Ruth and Frank and put it on the wall where all 3 of them could look at it at once and let it be wrong in front of people instead of quietly right in a room nobody else ever walked into. That part scared her more than the marker had. She went and found Hal anyway. She'd asked Hal, Ruth and Frank to come look at something. Not sit down. Look. The wall map was still there. Nobody in this building took anything down. But Mars looked at it anyway when she came in. The way she'd check a pilot light was still lit before she trusted the stove to it. Quote, PO approval, art proof, decorator production, QC fulfillment, invoice. The chain ran the length of the paper like a rail of tickets nobody had bumped. Below the gap between fulfillment and QC, in her own handwriting. Who checks? Crossed out, and under it, smaller, nobody does. Hal had come in, still holding a stapler, like he'd been mid-task and hadn't quite let go of it, and planted himself square in front of the map like he already knew the punchline. Ruth came in wiping her hands on a rag that didn't need it, and stopped a few feet off, near the table, arms half crossed, close enough to see the wall, but not close enough to commit to looking at it yet. Frank came in last, a folder of something under his arm, and hung back by the door, the posture of a man who'd been told to bring paperwork, and wasn't sure which paperwork.
This is the same drawing from before.
He said it the way he'd said that's just Tuesday 2 days ago. Easy, already halfway to dismissing whatever came next. Nobody had called the 3 of them into the break room to stand in front of a wall since she'd started. Ruth's eyes flicked toward Hal, checking whether this was something he'd asked for or something that was happening to him.
Same paper, new line.
Mars uncapped the marker. Her hand didn't shake, which surprised her a little, given how much she wanted it to. She tapped fulfillment, then the crossed-out question below it.
Both of those are already on this wall. Neither one explains why the wrong label went out dressed up as something Winslow's could actually promise a hospital. That's a different question. That's what we're telling people we can do.
She drew a line above the whole chain, quote, PO approval, all the way to invoice. A long horizontal stroke floating over the top of it like a lid. In the space above, she wrote, what we tell clients we can do. Nobody said anything for a second. The coffee maker ticked, cooling.
Reliable rush turnaround. For hospital accounts. That's what sales sells. It's not written down anywhere on this map. It only ever worked because you personally remembered to make it work every single time, by hand.
She made herself say the next part slower than she wanted to, because the version of her that used to work a hotline would have already said the ugly part out loud and let the room deal with it. And she was trying, for the first time she could remember, not to be that version.
I don't think that's a capability. I think it's you.
That's not fair.
Hal set the stapler down on the break room table hard enough that it skidded an inch.
I've built relationships with these people for 15 years, and you're standing there calling it nothing. I've built relationships with these people for 15 years, and you're standing there calling it nothing.
Nothing's the word you're using, not mine.
Mars kept the marker capped now, both hands around it.
What I'm telling you is it's not on this wall anywhere, and it needs to be. Because right now, if you get hit by a bus tomorrow, Elaine Marsh's account doesn't have a rush capability. It has a hole where you used to stand.
That's...
Hal looked at Ruth like he expected her to back him up. Ruth didn't say anything. She was looking at the wall.
I want to ask something.
Terse, the way she always was, but not sharp the way she'd been in the staging area a few scenes ago.
You said nobody checks the label. That's from Dale, that's not from me.
A flat look at Mars, not quite an accusation.
You come to my staging area asking questions like, I'm hiding something. And now you're telling me it was never about the staging at all.
The staging area was always clean. I should have said that sooner. I'm saying it now.
Ruth held the look a second longer, then let it go, some of the tightness leaving her shoulders, the guardedness easing off without quite turning into warmth. There was somebody else this map owed an answer to, and he wasn't even in the room to hear it. Terry had stood at slot 41 and sworn the card was already wrong, and Mars had walked away with both hands empty because she'd had no way to check it. She had a way now. The gap Dale had named lived above the shelf, not at it. And an index card older than Terry's, whole 2 years on the shelf. Nobody ever assigned to verify it was exactly the kind of thing that gap left lying around, wrong, for as long as it took someone to trip over it.
Terry didn't grab careless either. Slot 41 was already mislabeled. That's not a picker being sloppy, that's this. Same hole. I owe him that answer too.
She tapped the wall again.
There's something in the numbers I want to flag.
Everyone looked at him, and he looked like he wished they hadn't. He opened the folder he'd been carrying, more out of habit than need.
The timestamps I pulled, the batch got reordered at 9:40 in the morning. Elaine's office called at 9:15. That's 25 minutes between the promise and the batch actually moving.
He said it carefully, hedging even the fact itself.
I don't know if that changes what you're saying. I just don't want anybody saying this happened faster or slower than it did.
It doesn't change it. It's the same 25 minutes either way. Nobody used them to check anything. That's the whole point.
She looked back at Hal.
I'm not saying you didn't do your job for 15 years. I'm saying your job was never supposed to be the only place this lived.
Hal didn't answer right away. He looked at the map, the whole chain, the new line floating over the top of it, the words in her handwriting that named finally the thing he'd spent the book not looking at directly. Mars left Hal standing in front of the wall with the stapler still in his hand and walked toward the front of the building, because staying in that room felt like watching someone finish a sentence she'd already said for him. She heard the phone before she reached the front office. Not ringing, already answered, already going, Hal's line lit up on the console at the empty reception desk, which meant somebody back there had picked it up before she'd even left the break room. She hadn't heard it ring. She must have missed it by seconds on her way out. It was Deb's voice she caught first, thin through the wall.
Let me get him for you.
Then nothing, a hold, and then Hal's voice, already at his desk somehow, faster than she'd have thought a man carrying a stapler could move, picking up a line that had apparently been waiting on him.
This is Hal.
Mars stopped just past the doorway into the print decoration side, close enough to hear, far enough that she wasn't standing over him. The building didn't care where she stood. It carried Hal's voice to her the same way it carried everything, the way it had carried her own voice back at him 3 weeks ago on her first day, asking Ruth a question that hadn't landed the way she'd meant it to.
I understand.
Hal's voice had gone flat in a way she hadn't heard from him before. Not the folksy flatness he used when he was managing someone, but something with less give in it.
No, I understand completely. That's a fair thing to be upset about.
A pause, longer this time. Mars watched his free hand, the one not holding the receiver, come down flat on the desk and stay there, like he needed somewhere to put it.
It's a compliance issue. I know it's a compliance issue. I'm not treating it like a shipping mix-up.
Another pause. Whatever was coming through the line was long enough that Hal had time to close his eyes for a second, which she'd never seen him do on a call before.
I hear you. I do. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it won't happen again without telling you why it won't.
Silence. Mars found she'd stopped moving entirely, one hand resting against the doorframe, the same stillness she used to hold in a kitchen doorway when a ticket came back wrong twice in one night and everyone on the line went quiet, waiting to see who'd catch the blame.
I understand if you need to look at other vendors.
Hal's voice cracked on vendors, just barely, just enough that she heard it and didn't think she'd have caught it a month ago.
I'm not going to pretend that's not on the table. I would, in your position.
He listened again. His hand on the desk had curled, not into a fist, just closed, the invoices he'd been squaring 3 days ago, nowhere near it now. He hung up without a goodbye she could hear, just the receiver going back into its cradle, slow, deliberate, like he was setting down something that might go off if he dropped it. He didn't turn around. He sat there with both hands flat on the desk now, looking at nothing in particular, and Mars understood, standing in a doorway in a building that let sound travel wherever it wanted, that she had just watched the actual cost of being right. An hour ago, it had been marker on butcher paper. Now it was an account big enough to matter, genuinely, actually deciding whether Winslow's still deserved it. Hal was still at his desk when she came back, hands still flat on it, like he hadn't moved since the call ended. He looked up when she came in, and there wasn't any fight left in his face, which was somehow worse than the defensiveness had been.
I heard some of that.
Figured you did.
He didn't ask how much. The building didn't leave much room for pretending otherwise. She didn't sit down across from him. She stood the way she used to stand at a pass window when the whole line was 2 minutes from falling apart, and somebody needed to say the next useful thing instead of the biggest thing.
I'm not going to tell you how to run your sales calls. That's not mine to fix, and I don't know how.
She let that sit a second, because she meant it, and because she needed him to hear that she wasn't reaching for more than she had a right to.
But the gap Dale showed me, nothing checks a rush order against its ticket before it ships. That one I can put a shape on. Small one.
Hal didn't say anything, which she took as room to keep going rather than permission. Hal didn't say anything, which she took as room to keep going rather than permission.
A tag. Bright color, doesn't matter which. Something nobody's using for anything else already. Anything that gets called in as a rush gets that tag on it the second Ruth hears the word from you. Not just bumped up the shelf, marked. And a bin, one spot in the shipping corner, separate from the regular shelving, so a rush order isn't just faster, it's different, and everybody back there can see with their eyes that it's different.
She held up a hand before he could answer.
And one more person looks at it before it goes out. Not a department, not a form. Just somebody besides whoever pulled it, checking the label against the ticket for anything wearing that tag. 30 seconds. That's it.
That's it?
Hal repeated, like he was checking the size of it against something in his head.
That's it.
Mars kept her voice level.
I'm not asking you to write a manual nobody's going to read, and I'm not asking Frank to build me a tracking sheet for it. I know that's not where this company is yet. I'm asking for a tag, a bin, and a second set of eyes on anything that's wearing the tag. It doesn't fix what happened on the phone just now. It fixes the one specific hole Dale pointed at, so it doesn't happen the same way twice.
Hal looked past her, toward the hallway, in the general direction of the shipping corner, like he was picturing the tag already sitting somewhere back there.
Ruth's going to think you're telling her how to run her floor.
Ruth's going to think that for about a day. Then she's going to see it catch something before it ships instead of after, and she's going to stop thinking it.
She didn't know that for certain. She said it like she did, because she'd learned that much from working a kitchen line. You didn't pitch a fix by hedging it to death. You pitched it clean and let the results argue for you later.
All right.
Hal said it plainly, no ceremony in it, which was almost more unsettling than if he'd argued.
Tag in a bin. Somebody double checks it before it ships. Talk to Ruth.
He picked up a pen off the desk, turned it over once in his fingers, set it back down without writing anything.
That's not going to fix what I did on that call.
No, it's not supposed to.
She turned to go find Ruth because there was a version of this where she stood in the front office a while longer, making him feel better about it. And that version wasn't going to get a tag on a shelf any faster. Mars found Ruth, and Ruth listened to the tag and bin idea with her arms crossed and one eyebrow doing most of the talking. And when Mars finished, Ruth said, "Fine," in the tone of someone reserving the right to be right about it turning out badly. And that was that. It took less time than Mars expected. She went back toward the front office to tell Hal it was handled and found him already reaching for the phone again, not answering this time. Dialing.
Who are you calling?
Elaine's office, again.
He didn't look up from the number pad.
Not going to leave it where it sat an hour ago.
Mars stayed in the doorway. Nobody had told her to be there for this one, and she almost turned around, but something in the set of his shoulders, squarer than she'd seen them all week, like a man walking back into a kitchen he'd just walked out of, made her stay.
Hi, it's Hal Winslow again, following up on the call from this morning.
A pause.
I know I already said I was sorry, and I meant it, but I wanted to call back with something more than sorry.
Another pause, longer. His free hand had come up to rest against the edge of the desk, not gripping it this time, just resting.
You're right that an apology doesn't stop it from happening again. That's actually why I'm calling.
Mars watched him listen. Whatever came back through the line, his face didn't do anything dramatic with it. No wince, no relief. Just a kind of steady attention she hadn't seen him give a phone call before. The look of someone actually hearing the words instead of waiting for his turn.
Here's what's changing on our end, starting today. Any order that comes in as a rush, and I mean the second somebody on my side says the word rush out loud, gets flagged physically. A tag on the order, a separate bin in the shipping corner. So it's not just first in line, it's handled different, on purpose, by someone who isn't the person who pulled it off the shelf. Somebody double checks the label against the ticket before it goes out. Every time, not just for you, for anybody we call a rush from now on.
He said it plainly, no salesman's polish on it, which was, Mars thought, probably the first time all week his sales voice and his actual voice had been the same voice. A longer silence this time. Hal's jaw tightened, just slightly, and he nodded once at nothing, the reflexive nod of a man agreeing with something he didn't like hearing.
That's fair. I understand if you want that in writing, or if you want to see it holding up over the next few orders before you take my word for it. I'd want the same thing in your position.
He listened again.
No, I understand. I'm not going to pretend one phone call fixes 15 years of you trusting me on a handshake. I'm just telling you the handshake's not the only thing holding this up anymore.
He said a few more things after that. A date, a next order confirmation, something about a follow-up call in 2 weeks that Mars didn't fully catch. And then he set the receiver down, gently this time, no hesitation in it. He sat there a second, not smiling, not slumping with relief either.
She's not happy. She's willing to see how the next couple of orders go before she decides anything final. That's not the same as happy.
He said it to Mars, or to the desk, or to nobody in particular.
No, it's not.
She went back to the break room to get the tag from wherever the office supplies lived, and Hal was already there, which she hadn't expected. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the wall map, hands in his pockets, in the specific way people look at something they've decided to stop arguing with.
You're going to need more paper eventually. That's near full.
I know.
Mars stood beside him, not too close. The map ran its whole length in front of them. Quote to invoice, the crossed-out question, nobody does underneath it. And above the whole chain now, in marker still faintly wet when she'd drawn it that morning. The line that named the thing nobody in the building had wanted to look at directly. It looked, from 3 feet back, less like an accusation than she'd been afraid it would. It looked like a floor plan, like something you could actually build on, if you were patient, which she wasn't sure yet that she was.
Elaine's office wants a follow-up call in 2 weeks. I told her I'd have somebody document what changed by then, in case she wants specifics.
I can help with that.
She said it too fast, the old reflex. Say yes before anyone finishes asking. Make yourself useful before anyone has time to wonder if they need you.
I know you can. That's sort of the point. I wasn't going to ask Ruth to write it up. I wasn't going to ask Frank either, much as he'd hedge his way through every sentence of it. I was going to ask you.
Mars didn't say anything right away. There was a version of her, the version that had stood in her grandfather's kitchen 3 weeks ago and heard the restaurant is yours whenever you're ready, and felt the walls of a life closing in around a thing she hadn't chosen, that wanted to make this smaller than it was, wanted to say sure, whatever you need, and let the moment pass without costing her anything. She caught herself reaching for that same flattening reflex now and didn't quite let it finish.
I'm not going to give you a title for it. I don't know what the title would even be. You're not just shipping anymore. I don't know what else to call that, so I'm not going to call it anything. I'm just going to start asking you things I used to only ask myself.
Okay.
Okay.
That seemed to be the whole ceremony of it. No handshake, no announcement to the floor, nothing that would have made it feel like the thing she'd refused at the restaurant. An inheritance with her name already written on it before she'd agreed to anything. This was smaller than that, and standing there, she understood it was smaller on purpose, and that the smallness was exactly what made it hers. She looked back at the wall map. Half finished still. Room left above the new line she'd drawn that morning. Room left everywhere, actually, if she was honest about it. The paper ran out eventually, same as Hal said, and there was plenty on this building she still didn't have the first layer of, let alone the fourth. She thought for just a second about tearing the whole sheet down and starting a cleaner one, something that would look less like a fight and more like a plan. She didn't. It could stay exactly as ugly and unfinished as it actually was. That felt more like the truth than any clean version would have.